Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This video I'm going to be talking very bare bones about APIs, specifically REST APIs that I've been using in some of my projects. The last video I did on this was the Space App project utilizing a NASA API, and I got a couple of people messaging me asking all sorts of questions about APIs. What are they? What was the purpose of JSON in those APIs? And I figured just to kind of answer them all at once, we'll make a very simple video with the sole focus of going over how these kind of simple APIs work. So the first thing I want to say is that APIs work in all sorts of different languages. I primarily use JavaScript and TypeScript because those are the languages that I use during development. Those are my primary languages. But you can do these in pretty much any language that has HTTP support, which should be all of them. You can utilize APIs. But for today's example, we're going to go through a very simple, as you can see it's only 2 files and this one's 6 lines of code, just really showing how these work. So just to start here, very simple HTML body. I've got my script here. My script is marked as asynchronous. That's really important, and we'll get into that. And then I have a div here with a little paragraph and an ID. That's really it. And then what we can do is come here, and this is all of the code to get one query for one piece of data off of an API. So I've just called this data handler. There are really 2 main parts here. So the first part here is defining what's called a request. So the way these simple APIs work is they're utilizing an HTTP request. Usually that request is going to be a GET request, but sometimes it could be a POST if the API allows you to upload data. In this case, it'll be a GET request, and that's not something that we really need to define here. That's kind of built into what we're doing. And this is the URL for it. So I'm using SWAPI, which is the Star Wars API. Let me pull this over here. Hopefully, okay, cool, you can see that. So this is SWAPI. This is a completely open API to the internet. You don't need an API key, you don't need a password, an account, you don't need any of that. You can literally use this URL here and whatever query you want, and it will, in your app, and it will give you the data. They've got some really helpful documentation here as well in terms of how to do it, and you can kind of see some of the data here as we're scrolling along. Reading documentation for APIs is very, very important because all of them work a little bit differently in terms of, okay, what do I need to put into my URL request to get the kind of data that I need. So this is, you can see swapi.dev/documentation here. Okay, so essentially what I'm doing is I'm querying the API link here, so swapi.dev/API, and I'm querying the first person in the database. So all that is a string. Now what I'm going to do down here, this is a built-in JavaScript function called fetch. And what fetch does is it takes a URL string, so this one right here, and it goes out into the internet and attempts to retrieve data from it. Okay, so from our request we get a response. That response is data, and then I'm going to return that as JSON. So here's where I want to talk a little bit about JSON and what JSON is, because I had a couple of questions about that. Essentially what JSON is you can think of it as pairs of data, right? We'll do this really quick, test.json. Okay, so the way that a JSON object or JSON object is built is in key value pairs. So I can say name Bob. Let's see, age, Bob is old, Bob is like 68. Okay, so this is valid JSON. JSON can get a little bit more complex than this, but really at its fundamentals, JSON is one or more objects. You can also represent JSON as an array of objects. So I can do this, and then I can create a new one that's Mildred, and Mildred is 57, and this is valid JSON. So what we have here is an array of objects. Now all this is this is a JavaScript object. If you're familiar with JavaScript at all, this should look familiar to you. JSON actually stands for JavaScript Object Notation, and all it is saying there is an object that exists, the attribute name, the value of that is Bob, and the attribute age, the value of that is 68. That's all this is saying. So when we get the data returned, you'll see it in JSON, and you will see the key value pairs. So this gets returned as JSON. The response does, and then so this data here is the JSON, and all this is doing is displaying it to our page, right? So I'm taking my data and I'm getting some element in the document, and I'm setting its inner HTML to the string value of the JSON. So let's see what that looks like. All right, and just to show you, so we can refresh, and you can see it'll requery, it'll query the same thing. But this is the data for Luke Skywalker. You can see it's all displayed here, but we'll look at it in the console. It's a little bit easier to see that way. So again, we can see that key value pair here. So name, his name is Luke Skywalker, his hair color is blonde, his gender is male, and also the different attributes, if you will, can be arrays. So I have an array here. He was in films 1, 2, 3, and 6. Those are a little bit like out of order. So like he wasn't in Phantom Menace, he wasn't in Attack of the Clones. This is, I believe, New Hope, and moving on. But anyway, so you can see how the data here is laid out. Now if I wanted to only get one specific piece, let's go here. What I could do is I could say data.name. That's all I want is his name. And there it is, just Luke Skywalker. Let's say I wanted his age. I think that's a parameter. Undefined. Okay, that's not. Let's get his gender. We'll do gender. That's it. There you go. So you can see that you can query the whole object, or you can query a specific part of it. Now I'm pulling all of the data back here, but I'm displaying this piece there as well. I believe I can do this. Never mind, I can't do that. Yeah, so pretty much what you're going to want to do is query the whole piece of data. And you're going to want to then, out of said data, take what you want. Usually you're not going to just take one piece, you'll take multiple for whatever you're doing, and then you will display or utilize that data elsewhere. So hopefully this was, a good intro to what APIs are, at least these simple APIs. There's definitely much more complex APIs out there. Hopefully you learned something. If you did, please like the video and share it. I'm sure it'll help some other people out. And if you have any more questions about APIs and stuff, feel free to leave a comment down below, and I will do my best to answer you. Thanks guys, and see you in the next one.